great day for work here at the Happy Healthy Workplace podcast. I'm Kimberly Ficklin, your host. And every week we talk to professionals just like you all around the world because we want to find out what they do to create a profitable business, the kind of business where people really want to work. Hello and happy healthy day, everybody. Today's show, we have Karen Rayburn, and Karen is the owner at The Profitable Firm. PF is the creative agency exclusively for accountants. They operate under 4 value pillars: creativity, integrity, generosity, and rest. In episode 10, Karen shared with us why rest is so important in the workplace. And in episode 12, she shared with us why creativity is so important. In episode 21, she shared with us why being a generous leader can make you a great leader. And today we're going to talk about PF's last pillar, the integrity pillar. Karen's going to chat with us about the hashtag integrity. And the Profitable Firm's integrity pillar says this: our integrity will never come into question with you, our team, or anyone who knows us. We will not ethically cut corners. We will be truthful, and we will not lie to you. Equally, these qualities are of the highest importance to the accountants, firms, and strategic partners with whom we work. All righty, Karen. First, welcome back to the show.
Thank you for having me again.
It's always a really fun conversation to have with you, Karen, because we're sharing your 4 pillars of integrity, and they've been really interesting and very helpful for other leaders I know who have been listening to the podcast. And we love our friends of the show, which are our recurring guests. So thank you for being one of those. But today we are going to hear about PF's 4th pillar, integrity. So let's jump right in, Karen. Start with the main reason that this is one of the 4 company pillars.
Yeah, I think it's interesting when we were setting the pillars for the company. I remember thinking, everybody says they have integrity. Like, is that a given? Is that something that every company is like, well, of course we have integrity. Of course we're friendly. Of course we're professional. Of course, whatever. And I thought, okay, maybe there are a lot of companies who say they have integrity. Maybe there's a lot of companies who actually put that in their values and promote it. But I think for me personally, and for us as a company, it was important to us to state it almost as a reminder and a check to us that this is very important. And as with all values, all of our pillars, we have 6 internal values now, which define like the way we do the work. So these 4 pillars that we're talking about are like the foundation for how we run the business. We run it with creativity, integrity, generosity, and rest. But when we were looking at these pillars and what they mean, we want to be reminded as a company constantly of it, so that we can check our own actions against it. And the team will do this regularly. They'll say, well, I want to do this thing for a client. Can I just do this as a generosity pillar? Or I'm going to do this thing just for some creativity pillar. And we do check ourselves on integrity as well and say, actually, I think for integrity pillar, we need to explain it this way, or we need to do things this way. For us, it really very, very simply means doing the right thing. I think what's difficult in our culture and our time right now is that everybody seems to define that a little differently, as long as it doesn't hurt anyone else. I'm like, yeah, I struggle with that one, because how do you know? How do you know what hurts somebody else? How do you know how this is coming across? I've definitely seen in my years as a business owner, and even before that there are a lot of people that will do things that many of us would agree are either borderline or point blank wrong, and they would find a way to excuse it or to say it's okay. So, we don't pretend we're the arbiters of society in terms of morality, but what we do recognize is that there are things that are right and there's things that are wrong. There's things that are good and things that are bad. And we do the best that we can to err on the side of doing the right thing and the good thing for the sake of our team and our clients and ourselves, and to have conversations about what the best right thing is to do.
So with that said, what is integrity?
The best definition I like to say is character, who you are when no one else is watching. And I realize that integrity for me means that being the best of yourself when nobody else is watching. There's nothing in it for you. There's nobody else who's going to praise you or not praise you if you do the right thing or don't. It might actually cost you, but it is the thing that is the good and noble and even, can I say, righteous thing to do, that means that when you say you're going to do something, you do it. When you have an opportunity to do good or bad, you choose good, that you've investigated in your own mind what the best good is, that you have some sense of truth and lies, and that you can tell the difference between them, and that what you say matters. I do find it hard to define, I think, in the sense that a lot of people seem to define it sort of woolly. And I just bring it back to, well, is it good or bad? Is it right or wrong? Is it okay or not okay? And as I said, I think as a culture, we find that difficult because many people don't have a foundation on which they base that. They're
Yeah.
like, where do I get that from? Is it more or less okay? And what's right for you isn't right for me, and vice versa. And, as I said, this maybe isn't the venue for going into where we get our ultimate truth from, but I think it's a good question to ask yourself, what does integrity mean to you? And where do you get that from? My personal integrity, if I kind of set that aside from the business in a sense, is that as a Christian, I look at like morality and things that have been laid down, and these are good laws and rules to live life by, and these are not. And my personal beliefs would be that God set those, and so that those are there, those are foundational, and that's what I can base it against. But as many of you know, many of you will have friends who are Christians or say they're Christians and do horrible things, or have treated people badly. And I think it's really dangerous for us to look around at people and go, oh, well, you say you have this integrity and then you do that thing. So I think a lot of times it comes back to checking to see, are you willing to apologize? Are you willing to say, hey, I'm sorry. I now realize this would have been a better thing to do and I didn't do it. Or here's what I think the best thing is. Can we have a conversation about that? So I know that it can seem a little woolly, but I think that's because a lot of us haven't taken the time to really figure out what the rock solid truths of good and bad are. That does make it hard for people to define integrity. Does that make sense?
It absolutely makes sense. And I agree with you. And you're right about the fact that each one of us has a different ideal of what integrity is.
Mm,
However, despite whatever your religious beliefs are or are
mm.
not, even in society, we have a base
Uh-huh,
understanding, right, of what is
uh-huh.
good and bad, even just in our societies, because we all have rules and laws that we have to go by. And, our parents teach us certain things.
Mm,
But everybody's integrity is different. Let me expound on that. Is that I
mm,
think everybody's is different in that we know what the base is. Probably everybody at least has an understanding, even the people who don't operate at that base or operate underneath the
mm.
base, right? They still probably understand what that base is. But
Yeah.
then there's those of us who take that base and then also there's more to it than that.
I think everyone has a conscience. I think
Mhm.
it's really important to recognize that every human being has a conscience. And the conscience within you does kind of indicate one way or the other. As you say, we have to have laws and rules as a society, as a culture. Some of them are, quote, small rules that, don't feel super important to us, but we know they have an ultimate good. And then other ones, most people would be like, yes, this thing is wrong, that thing is wrong, this thing is right and good. I think when you recognize that we have a conscience for a reason, then it is good to just ask yourself if you're listening to that conscience and where that's coming from. Or, have you just let some things slide for a while? And I've seen whenever there's, for example, some new government rules or regulations that come into play, and they're all kind of confusing, which is fair enough because it's new, or maybe it's just been thrown into place for a crisis or an emergency. And you're like, all right, so here's all these rules. What do they mean? How do they work? How do we apply them? I've seen some people that are going, oh, can we kind of sneakily get money out of this thing? And people are going, no, that's not the spirit of the law. Like, I suppose, yes, technically you could do that. But really, if you do it that way, you're voiding the whole point of it. The whole point is to help people or to provide for those who don't need, and you don't need anything. So why are you kind of tweaking things to get it that way? And
Hmm.
this is where integrity comes into play, is asking, what is the heart of it? What is the purpose of it? How are we actually going to genuinely help people? And what is the best and most right thing to do right now in this situation, even if no one agrees with me? Even if everybody thinks that I'm being petty and I'm being a stickler and, oh, I mean, I've even had people sometimes say, like, oh, I think you're being a little too strict. I don't think any of us would judge someone if they did this. I'm like, well, I'm not judging you, but I'm saying I wouldn't do it. And
Hmm.
this is why I wouldn't do it, because I don't think that's the heart or the meaning or the point of the law or the rule or the regulation. And I want to err on the side of good. And I want to err on the side of help. And I want to err on the side of, if I can even use that word, but I want to lean to that side always and do the most generous thing and the most creative thing, the most helpful thing, the most gracious thing. And I'm not going to pretend for a second that I always do it, by the way. Like, for sure, there's many times when I'm like, oh, no, I didn't do the best thing there. And that's where integrity says, I'm going to own up to that and I'm going to apologize for that and try and make it right.
That's a key point. I was thinking about, and we'll get into this about how this is into the workplace here, but I was thinking about one thing when I first started the podcast. I have a lot of people that reach out and want to be on the podcast. And
Mm.
at first you get really excited, right? You're like, okay, then you start to realize that you just want very specific people, right? Because you have
Mhm.
a message you want to relay, and some people aren't really relaying that message or don't have integrity behind wanting to be on it. And having a conversation with other people who podcast saying, oh, I already booked this person, but I really don't think they're a good fit for the podcast.
Yeah.
Right. And then somebody actually calling me out and saying, where's your integrity
Mm.
behind this? Like, why are you here asking
Yeah.
other people what you should be doing when
Yeah.
technically you really should just be communicating with that person that you booked and saying, hey, I've had a change of heart. I
Yeah.
apologize.
Yeah.
Now that I've had a chance to think about it, I really don't think we're a good fit and I'll just
Mhm.
be canceling it. And I was
Yeah.
like, oh my gosh. And I was not trying to operate out of integrity in any way, shape, or form
Yeah.
because I always try to operate integrity,
Mhm.
but that was some other person's ideal of what integrity was.
Yeah.
And it made me think, wow, okay. So integrity is really big. And you and I are talking about the rules and doing the right and the wrong,
Mm.
but it's more than even that. I mean,
Mm.
that was the right or the wrong. I was hiding behind just being
Mm.
transparent with someone. If I'm not being transparent with someone, and it's really to save my own self,
Mhm.
right? Because it really is to say my, oh, well, how am I going to feel when I make them feel away? Maybe I won't make them
Mhm.
feel away. Maybe they don't care. Maybe they're like, whatever,
Yeah.
you one of 200 podcasts I booked. What do I care?
Yeah.
You know what I mean? But yeah, I started thinking about what that really meant when they brought up that word integrity to me. And I did. It gave me the power to go back and really have conversations with people and say, thanks so much, but no, thank you. And moving forward, always being able to step into that integrity each time. It was
Mhm.
beautiful. I thanked that person for helping me to think about it that way.
Yeah, and I think the people who match our values, this is another important point about values. I've been thinking a lot about them, particularly in the last 6 months or so, because as I said, PF has these 4 pillars that are foundational to the business, but we've also been working on 6 internal values that kind of more specific, that define how we actually do the work. Things like stay positive, have an opinion, collaborate, be gracious, things like that. But the more you think about values, the more important it is that you do business with people who have a values match to you. So I know that for some people, when I say, well, I can't do this thing, or I prefer not to do this thing for integrity reasons, and they would say, well, actually, my integrity reasons say that I can do that. I'm not the one who's telling them what I think they ought to do. I
Mhm.
can say, well, in my opinion, this is what could happen and what it looks like and whatever. It is your call. But what we look at PF is working with people and companies who share our values. And so when, for example, someone who wants to work with us, or all the time we have companies who want to do things with us or share blog posts or whatever, and we tend to work with people where we've got a position of trust. We have a relationship. We've come to know them over a period of years, preferably. And if it's a company, for example, there's some companies where our clients use the company's app or software, or whatever it be. And we know after a period of a couple years that they have always been positive and gracious and helpful and have done the right thing and have called out the wrong thing and have done what they said they would do And they have done that over and over and over and over again until we finally get to the point, not a specific point, but we just suddenly realize like, hey, these people are our people. They talk like we talk, they work like we work. As an example, one of our kind of strategic partners is, I use that loosely, but this is just a company that we really like, is a company called Go Proposal. And they have a proposal app that accountants use. And a lot of our clients, not all of them, but a lot of our clients use that app. And they have this Facebook group full of accountants, which I am in because Go Proposal said, hey, it's fine with us if you're in it, which is very kind of them. And a lot of the conversations in there, you might have an account say, hey, my client asked me to do this thing. And I would look at it and be like, that looks like it's, either borderline illegal or just wrong, or it's leaning towards wrong. And what encouraged me is all the other accountants in this group were like, no, mate, that's not right. That's not right. And you can't do it. And you got to go back and tell them. And they're like, yeah, that's what I thought. But thanks for the support. Really appreciate it. And I thought, that matters too, because the clients of somebody else's company reflect on that company. The team of someone else's company reflect on that company. When we do have live events, whenever my team are out talking to people, or even if they're just having video calls or whatever, then how they act is a reflection on the company, which is why it's so important that our team does live up to those pillars. But that's why, because it flows out from far more than just you.
Those are great points. We've talked on the podcast about why being social as a leader is important. And it goes in line with what you just said, because your employees are out being the face of you, right?
Mm-hmm.
So if your team doesn't have the integrity behind what your company is promising or living by, and it'll be known, it'll be seen, and people will see it for what it is. Probably even more so when you are always operating within integrity and your clients are really used to that. They're going to spot something that's not right really quickly.
Yeah. And conversely, they're really great at praising when people do live up to values. And we've been very encouraged how many times people are going, man, I met with your team and they're just so positive and so generous and so encouraging. And we always call that out in a positive way in our team to be like, hey, good job to this person for living up to the value, because people notice that, but they don't always tell you. Like people will tell me years later, oh, I've been following your stuff for years and I feel like everything that you share is so positive and so encouraging and so generous. And now I'm ready to work with you. Clients are checking on your integrity too. They're checking to see if your word is your bond, to use the old phrasing, like back in the day when people would shake hands on something and that was enough. And sadly, it's not enough now. I think there are a few people in my life that I could say, yeah, if they shook hands on it or just said, their yes is yes and their no is no. That is a really important, valuable thing that is very precious when you know that you can trust someone, especially for those of us. I know all of us at one point or another have been let down by someone fairly significantly, or several someones. And that's hard because you're tempted to sort of question it, be like, man, how did I not see this? And maybe we didn't see it, or maybe they changed. Maybe they weren't like that and they changed. But either way, whatever their decision is, we can't do anything about them and about their reactions. All we can do is about our response and our actions and our responsibility. At the end of the day, that's all you can take action on.
And that's true. When we stop trying to control other people and take control of our own actions, because we can't change anybody else. And I love that you brought up, you never know who's watching you in the background and or how long they will be watching you before or if they ever reach out to you. And your integrity has to be the same. I mean, we talk about your branding, everything has to be consistent so that way, when they do need something, you're always top of mind with them, right? You just don't know. I had somebody reach out to me recently saying, oh, we have this consortium. Will you come give a talk? I don't know why I never even thought about you. I've been listening to the podcast and blah, blah, blah. And I thought, well, you never know who's really paying attention.
It's so true. Website social terms, we call them the lurkers, which makes them sound maybe a little more sketchy or even evil than we intend it to be. But these are the people who just kind of hover about. Maybe hoverers is a better word. They just kind of hover about. They don't click like, they don't retweet, They don't reply. They don't seem to engage in any way, but they see it. Like you, I've had even recently, I feel like in the last couple of weeks, especially, I've just had a lot of people almost out of the blue say, Karen, I've seen a lot of the videos and blog posts and things you've been putting out, and I'm seeing this. And essentially, what they're saying is, I see a pattern here and I appreciate it. And oftentimes I get a message like that on a day when I'm having a hard day, where something that I had to decide is difficult. And this is a really important thing about integrity is integrity does not mean the easy choice. A lot of times it means a hard choice, a choice that is a financial cost or some other cost, maybe an emotional cost or a relational cost. Sometimes in order to make a decision of integrity, you have to part ways with somebody relationally. And I've had to make some decisions in my life and in my business where there was a great financial cost to doing what I consider to be the right thing. I remember I had one situation where I had an accountant, my accountant who knows me well, and a lawyer say, Karen, they don't have a leg to stand on. So if you don't want to pay them any money or whatever it be, you don't have to. And I thought, okay, technically that's true, but I do have an email from a couple of years ago where I promised them this. And I thought, I think for the sake of my integrity that I need to do this. And I think I need to pay this money and I don't want to. And, they haven't treated me in the best possible way, but that's not the point. The point is you don't, at least for me anyway, I'm like, you don't give to people simply because they're nice to you. You don't only give to the nice people. You give when it's the right thing to do. You just do it because it is the right thing. I hear people using the phrase give to gain. And I see what they're saying. Like you do eventually, after much giving, it does come back to you, but that's not why you do it. Because if you give to gain, people spot that too. And they see it for fake and they see that you're trying to get money or get business or whatever. But if you're real and you're honest and you're just sharing your thoughts and who you are, that will become clear too. And then going back to what we're saying about people just kind of hover, they will notice that and they will see it. And they may never tell you, but people notice far more than they tell you about. And they talk to people. Everybody talks to each other, particularly in the accounting industry, which I'm part of. Everybody knows each other. Everybody talks about each other. I try hard to make it so that it never is gossip in the sense of talking about people behind their backs. Try and only say things that I would say or have said to people's face. But people do say, oh, I saw this and I saw that. And is this person good for their word? And you can see who's generous and who's helpful and who's maybe self-focused. And you can see that. And we notice that. And we notice it about others, but we have to remember people notice it about us.
People are paying attention. My husband says it to me all the time because I'll be like, yeah, but they blah, 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 blah. And he'll say, but we're not those people. That's what he tells you. That's his answer to me. But we're not those people.
Yep.
And then I'm like,
and we don't have to be.
You're right. Darn you.
Yeah.
Curse you.
Yeah. And I think that's what integrity has to do with too, is making the decision for yourself, not for what you think other people will like or not like, not for what the rest of the world thinks is right or not right. There are going to be some times where we have to make a decision that a lot of people will disagree with. There are sometimes you have to make a decision that will hurt people. I've spent a good bit of time kind of studying this concept of boundaries and how setting boundaries is a kind thing to do sometimes, to say, no, I'm not going to do this because although you'll feel hurt for a little while, you're not going to be harmed. I don't want to harm you, but sometimes people get hurt. Like you said, like say, for example, you said to somebody, yes, I will have you as a guest for the podcast. Then you change. They might feel a little hurt, but they wouldn't be harmed in the long run. And that's what we're trying to do. And integrity, I think, knows the difference between those and knows that you do everything possible not to hurt people, but you don't ease up on your own beliefs or decisions because it might hurt somebody, because sometimes people are hurt when you make what you believe is a right decision.
Yeah, it's true, but it's not long-term, like you said.
Yeah, that's right. We've all been there. I mean, I've had that happen where somebody said or did something, and I felt a little hurt. And then I worked through it and was like, well, you know what? That was what they needed to do. And I might have made a different decision, but hey, I respect them. They told me about it. And ideally, most of the time, you can stay friends and stay connected with them. And if both people are willing, and all is well in the end.
Hmm. Okay, so let's bring this back to the workplace. So,
Hmm.
integrity has always been one of my big things. Like, you could
Mm,
say just about anything about me and I
mm,
can shake it off. But if you challenge my integrity in any way, then that's where I'm like, I self
mm,
preserve, you know? And in the workplace, I had that happen often from my leaders. One of the things that I'll say I got in trouble for, I had communications with my supervisors about, was that I'm an underdog lover. So,
mm,
as a director and then having an administrator above me, oftentimes I would see things in the workplace that maybe even my administrator did to other employees that would make me feel like their integrity wasn't really intact.
mm,
And my integrity, then I'd be like, I want to stick up for that person. And so
mm.
I would always be the person saying, hey, into my bosses, so Sally's out there crying right now. Like, maybe there's something you could go say because she had just been talked to or whatever, right?
Mm.
And often it was, you don't worry about Sally. You go back to work, I'm going to make you cry. Well, that's a little bit harsh, but kind of like that, right? So I always felt like my integrity was helping people in the workplace that I saw weren't being taken care of. So, how, as someone who owns a business, Karen, and has employees who have integrity that may be different than yours, how can leaders help to meet the needs in regards to an employee's integrity?
Gosh, that's a deep one. I think, your point that it might be different for everyone. I think as a leader, you have to identify what is the same for everyone. Because yes, employees may have personal things that they do differently in their personal life or the weekend or with their family or whatever it be. But when it comes to business, we all have to know what the rules are. And if we don't know what the rules are, we have to discuss it and say, in this case, how are we as a team going to identify this? What are we going to do about this? How are we going to address this? Because there can't be any woolliness there. You can't go around saying, well, I think this for me, but you think that for you. Like, that's the whole point of being a leader and having a business that has its own grounds for integrity, I suppose, to say, well, at PF, this is what we mean by that. I'm extremely blessed to have just such an amazing team who are so supportive and encouraging and have integrity. And I don't think we've ever hit a point where anyone has disagreed with what we all think is the thing to do. Like, after discussion, we've had team members that go, well, I think we need to do this. And a couple other people give their opinion. And then the person goes, I see it from you. Yes, I see how that could be. And we want to make sure we stay this way. So, okay, yeah, that makes sense. And vice versa. I've had times of saying, guys, I think we need to do this. And the whole team has said, well, Karen, it could look like this and it could appear this way. And we got to watch these things. I'm like, oh, yeah, good point. Okay, thanks, guys. So we're all kind of checking each other, I think. And in a glorious team combination. And this is where trust is so, so important. And every small interaction, and this is true for any of the pillars and values of any company, is that every tiny small interaction is like a little piece on top of the pile. And we have to remember that you can have hundreds of pieces of things that are good and strong. But if you cut that off with even something apparently small, which is a lie or a hiding or something that doesn't live up to it, and then people find out about it or whatever, then that can destroy all of those other small good things. So that's why it's just not acceptable in the tiniest way for anybody, me as a leader or anyone in the team. And if there's ever any doubt, if I'm saying, oh, I may have given the impression of this, let's talk about it. And everything comes back to communication. Let's talk about it. Let's be open. One of our internal values is show transparency, which we define as sharing the right things at the right time to build relationship. And it's very specific the way that we define that, because we're like, transparency doesn't mean sharing all the things all the time. That's not helpful. What is helpful is saying, at this time, for the purpose of having a good relationship, I'm going to share this thing. And it might be a hard thing. You might be crying. You might be angry. You might be super excited. You might, whatever. And you're doing that because your goal is to build relationship. You want to have this strong relationship with the team and the clients and the companies that we work with and each other. So I think that for me is also part of integrity is we've defined part of it as that, as being transparent. So when we're sharing, well, I think this, then we transparently share why and where that came from.
That's a great point. Like we say a lot of times, pretty much harp at every episode, is it's really about making that space for integrity. So again, it's always just about creating these spaces in your business, these small pockets of time, communication, where everybody is on the same page or at least can understand what that page is.
Mm,
Because oftentimes, like you said, if we're not communicating, the leader of the company can believe that integrity is this and be very disappointed with what they're seeing
mm.
in that, but hasn't shared what they think it is. It's kind of like saying to a kid, they go out and do something wrong, and you're like, well, you weren't supposed to do that, but you've never told them what
Yeah.
your expectations
Yep.
are. It goes back to expectations, right? So you're
Yep.
sharing with your team. When it comes to integrity, like you said, we base it this way, and these are our expectations. Now, they'll be slightly different for each person, but this is the base of it here. We
Yep.
don't go below this ever.
Yep.
This is where we're at. Even there's many of us whose integrity will be even higher than this, and we expect that to happen, but we're communicating about it, right? And like you said, transparency and not sharing everything all the time. And we just talked about that. So I'll hit on that. We were talking right before we got on here about, we're right now in the midst of a global pandemic
Yep.
and employees are wanting to know what's going on. And so
Yep.
in transparency,
Mm,
as a good leader, you want to let them know. But how much is
mhm.
too much? How
Yeah.
much is enough? Are you going to scare them afterwards? Are they going to have
Mm,
more questions after you've
yeah.
told them what you need to tell them than they had before? Chat with us a little bit about that.
Yeah, this is a heavy one. Not gonna lie, Kimberly,
Do
because
not.
integrity, but it's just a phrase that we throw around. I
Yeah.
realize that. But it is to give the full truth, I think we're in a I was about to say unprecedented. I'm so sick of that word, but we are in a weird time. We're in a crazy time. We're in a time where everything's changing all the time. And one of the hard things for that is, as you say, how much do you share? And I think the best definition I can give or the best analogy I can give is with my team members who have children. I don't have kids myself. I've got nieces and nephews, but a number of my team members have kids. And I was talking to one of them recently, and actually, I was talking to a client as well who has kids, and both of them were saying, I'm trying so hard in this time to be strong, to show a good, brave face, and not to fall apart crying. Or if I fall apart crying, I do it in a corner or in the bedroom or the bathroom, and then I come out and I wipe my tears and, for the sake of the kids. And what we were talking about is with children, children are not stupid. I mean, they pick up on what is wrong, sometimes even faster than we pick up on it. They know when people are happy, they know when people are upset. And sometimes they call it out, sometimes they just feel it. And we were talking about how, I mean, each person can do this as they feel comfortable and are able, but we were talking about how important it is to be honest with children too and say, yeah, I am sad today. I am scared today. I am feeling this way. And, this hug that you give me helps me if you're able and with your kids and able to be close to them in that way. Or this thing that you did helps me. And now I will feel a little better on the other side. So thank you. We were talking about how that same concept is true for the team and for the clients. So we don't want to keep this brave face all the time so that they think, oh, they never have any problem. They're fine. They're not worried. They're not troubled. They're not angry. They're not scared ever. They're always positive. They're always at the top of their game. I mean, that's just not reality. That's not humanity. Anyone who is constantly always, without ever failing, being positive and encouraging and super at the top of their game is there's either something wrong or they're just covering it up and they're not sharing that. Now, I'm not saying you have to share everything. Again, sharing the right things at the right time to build relationships, share it with the right people. You don't have to share it on your Instagram story. I do sometimes, but not everybody has to. But the point is that from time to time, you share something that maybe you wouldn't normally share. You might say, I'm a little worried about this, and this is why I am worried. And let's talk about this and how this impacts us. So I was sharing with you right before we started the podcast that I was talking to the team about how I, as the business owner, in the middle of a crisis. I'm trying to look ahead. It's impossible to look ahead. Fortunately, I'm not alone in that. The whole world can't look ahead. We keep trying to, and then the game board keeps shifting and the pieces keep shifting every few seconds, it feels like. But you can share, well, this is where we're at today. And one of the things I shared with the team, I was literally just sending a message actually right before we recorded this podcast to say, guys, I just wanted to check in and say, we're good. I know it's my job to look ahead and even in a sense to worry on behalf of the business. And I think it's right to do that. But I also want to assure you that this is where we're at with the business. This is where the financial position is today. I don't want to make false promises to you, but also, we're good for this month. As far as we can tell, we're good for the next couple months. And nobody knows what's going to happen in an almost glorious way. Nobody knows in the sense that we're all in this together. But you have to decide how much you want to share and when so that people understand how you're feeling, but also so that you remember, oh, wait, maybe I didn't share with them that. I shared with them that I was feeling a little nervous and concerned, but I forgot to share with them that we had the most profitable year we've had in 8 years of doing business. Whoops, that might have been a good thing to share. And that way you've got all the information. And as we said, I don't pretend I do that perfectly. Maybe I do well at being transparent as a leader, but sometimes that can be a weakness too. And maybe I'm a little too transparent on something and forget to share the other piece of information. But as I said, when I do that, I apologize and say, guys, apologies. Maybe I was causing you guys to feel stressed and that was not my intention. And you're all doing amazing. And we have this incredible business and I couldn't do it without you. So let's focus on that.
Beautiful. And that's where the integrity comes right back around.
Background,
Comes
full circle.
right back, full circle as usual.
That's
Yeah,
how integrity works, actually. It does
right?
work in a
Isn't that,
full circle. Yeah.
it's a funny thing that way. But yeah, it is because it goes back to your integrity as a leader and deciding right now what is important to share and what isn't. We
Mhm.
did talk about, all of our governments being under uncertainty
Yep.
and a lot of our leaders are being looked at and judged. And it's like, well, nobody knows what they're supposed to be doing right now. I know we're all afraid and I know there's some things that could have been done better as always. But let's just think about how much stress people are under and are they operating out of integrity? Are they trying to do what they know to be the best thing that is? And I'm not talking about just our government, I'm talking about our leaders, our businesses. Are we talking to each other in a way that isn't lending to more fear
Mhm.
about what's happening right now?
Yeah, I think that's right. I was just thinking in the last couple days, there's been a few conversations I've had to have with people. They're hard conversations. These are hard times. So you have to have hard conversations and you sort of don't look forward to it and you're feeling nervous or worried and you don't know how this is going to go, or it seems like the thing that they said or did felt like this and you're trying to give them the benefit of the doubt, but you're feeling concerned or frustrated or confused. And what I and the team have kept reminding each other of is we don't know for sure unless they tell us. We don't know what's going on in their life personally. And if we did know, we would have so much more compassion. This has always been true. When you're driving along in the motorway and somebody flips you off and peeps the horn and they're angry at you, yeah, it's tempting to get angry back. And then you think, what if I knew that they had just found out that their daughter was sick in the hospital and they couldn't get to them, something like this.
Mm-hmm.
Would I be so angry? And you're like, no,
Mm-hmm.
not for a second. You'd be like, you know what? That's cool. I get it, mate.
Mm-hmm.
You care it. That's fine. You might even apologize. My bad. I, didn't signal, whatever it be. And I've been thinking about that a lot, particularly this week and recently. We are all under immense pressure, like the highest pressure we have ever been under in our lives. I can certainly say that for me. Multiple pressures, like not just this virus and the impact it's having on the economy, but family and friends. I've got relatives that have cancer. I've got other friends that have cancer. They're compromised in some way. And I've got that. Plus, I own a business. Plus, I've got a team and I want to make sure they still have jobs. And I've got clients and I want to look after them. And you just pile on all this stuff. And that's just me. And then you add every other human being on the face of the planet, all of whom have the same sort of things just as a base. Like, I'm not even talking about the next level of difficult stuff. That's just the core base we're all living on right now, normally. Then you add whatever thing, and some of you listening will have something that's happened to you either in the past or recently or today or whatever that has added extra stress. We recently found out about, kind of had a difficult conversation with someone and then came to find out that money had been stolen from their business bank account in the previous couple days. And as soon as we found that out, like first, we were super grateful that even in our conversations, we had said, okay, let's remember, we don't know what's going on. We don't understand where that's at. And then we found that out and went, oh my word. Can you
Hmm.
imagine how that would feel? How would you send an email or communicate or whatever if you were dealing with that? And it just calms you right down and gives you so much compassion for this poor person in this situation. And I have to remind myself every day. I mean, I'm not going to pretend. I can say this now on this podcast and I try to live by it. But oh my word, the number of times where I get angry or get frustrated or get upset. And I have to remind myself and be like, okay, all right. So let's just pull it back a little. Let's remember what we're all dealing with. I was at the post office a week or two ago, feels like a year ago. That's how time is going. And I'm at the post office. I couldn't fill out a form because she couldn't give me a pen because that's part of the health and safety right now. And instead of going, oh, of course, yeah, good decision, right? Excellent. Let's save everybody from this virus spreading. I was like, well, what am I supposed to do? You know, like I got to fill in this form and I got frustrated. And fortunately, very grateful, I caught myself and I'm like, you know what? I'm sorry. My bad. You're doing the best you can. What can I do? I'll buy a pen, you know, and I'm in this shop and I buy a pen for 50 pence and use it and all is well. And who cares? You know, it's 50 pence. People are dying out there. There's bigger things. But it amazed me how quickly we can descend to that if we don't just check and be like, okay, let's just remember where other people are at. And then, as you said, have the integrity to say, oops, my bad. Didn't quite understand that. Now I do. Let's move on from there.
Yep. And it came right back to integrity again.
It always does. Always does.
Always. Always. Oh, this is good. Good stuff. I am so happy that you came and shared this with us today. Well, as usual, the podcast seems to happen. Whatever message we're talking about seems to
Mm,
be the talk of the day. Integrity falls right in line with how we can behave right now.
mm,
If
mm.
we're always looking at our base integrity, and when it comes to business, because that's what we're here talking about
Yep.
as well, is that does your business have an integrity pillar? And if it
Mm,
does, what does it mean? And have you
mhm,
shared that with your company? So if you are listening right now and you haven't, then there's a action task for you to go back and just think, okay, what does integrity mean in our business? And you, as the leader, the business owner, come up with that idea. And then rather than going and telling everybody, hey, this is what I think integrity is, open up that conversation as Karen does with her team and say, look, this is what integrity means to me. Now let's have a
mm.
conversation about what it means to all of us. And then we come up with this very firm and grounded pillar. What I like about your pillars, Karen, is it's kind of like my whiteboard. When I start a business and I write all the do's and don'ts, like, I'm not going to do this, I'm not going to do
Mm,
that, because it's hard emotionally in business to not make emotional decisions sometimes. And I go back to my board, right? And I'm like, nope, I said that's not what I would be doing. So this is the same. You can go back to your pillars and always be like, this is how we operate.
yeah, and I think it's important to have real world conversations. Like you're saying, talk to your team. Absolutely. You got to talk to your team about real happening today or this week situations. Because if you talk generically about integrity, oh, yes, it means telling the truth and speaking up and not doing what's wrong. And we all agree with that. And you're like, okay. So we had an email from somebody who asked us this. What do you say to that? What does integrity say to that? And get specific, because integrity does not matter as a concept, as a phrase. That's not when it matters. It matters when you get the email from somebody that's difficult. It matters when you're confused or hurting. It matters when there's a new rule or regulation that's come into play that is confusing and a client asks, can we do this? And you go, oh, can we? You know, how does this work? And the other point I wanted to make too is like, we use the word integrity. I know clients use the word truth or honesty or justice or right. Like pick a word that means something to you. We're always saying that at PF about values. If your values are kind of general terms, like we're friendly, we're professional, we're modern, we have integrity, we're efficient, whatever. I think it's a struggle to make those your values because those are just general statements. I would hope that every business would be friendly and professional, efficient, and have integrity. But the reason, going back right to the beginning that you asked, Kimberly, about why is integrity one of the pillars? One of the reasons we did it was to state categorically this is important to us. We're not afraid to talk about it. And we, in a sense, are opening ourselves up for people to go, do I think that you acted with integrity here? And that's kind of scary. I think it can be scary sometimes to open yourself up to people who are going to say, well, I don't think you did. And I have had people, fortunately, very few, but there's been a few people in my life in the business who have just said, well, I think you've done the wrong thing. And I'm like, well, I've checked with myself. I've checked with my morals and what I believe God would say is right. I've checked with my team. I've checked with a couple other people I trust. And we all think this. So you're entitled to your opinion. I disagree with you. Let's just part ways the best that we can. And sometimes you have to do that. That is super hard. And that connects too with what we were saying about hurting and harming people. Like sometimes people are hurt because they disagree. And you have to do the best you can with what you have. Ask yourself, check against your own values, check with other people you trust. And if everybody that you trust is sort of saying the same thing, and then this one person is an outlier, it might just be that you have a difference of opinion. And that does happen. But having integrity or truth or honesty as a pillar, as a value, is an opportunity to say, we're not afraid to have this conversation. We're willing to put ourselves out there. We know it might be hard. And we do that on purpose because it matters too much. It's too important to be left unsaid.
That is a wonderful way to close this out. Beautiful closing words there, which are absolutely true about why it's important. And again, like we said, everybody's integrity might be different. So figure out what yours is. And I love the don't listen to the people who aren't really your tribe.
Yes.
You've checked in with everyone,
Yep.
but it's that one person that's like, and
There's
you're like,
always
well,
that one person.
I know.
You know what we call that person at PF? We call them the TripAdvisor person, because everybody knows that you go to TripAdvisor and you have this hotel or this restaurant or this whatever it be, and there's 500 reviews that are all the 5-star, and everybody thinks it's amazing. And then there's that one person that's like, the food was cold, the door was shut, the this was wrong. And eventually you're like, okay, let's look at the big picture here. I think they're just, no offense to TripAdvisor, by the way.
Right.
Amazing. And I use them all the time. But you know what I mean?
Yeah,
Like,
of
there's
course.
always going to be that one person, and that happens. And this is
Mhm.
why we have to, like you said, you have to have agreed upon values to come back to and check yourself against, because emotions are going to rise high.
Mhm.
And you don't want to be making decisions purely on emotion. You want to involve emotions, but you want to make your decisions based on values.
Yeah. And when you have them in writing, as you do, you can go back and say, well, let's go look at that pillar. And then everybody has a conversation about it. So I love that. If you're listening and you haven't designed yourself any of these value pillars, personally, I think it's an amazing way to keep yourself in check and help keep your team members in check, and also avoid confusion and maybe even avoid confrontation, because it's easy to go back and just say, hey, look, here's our agreements. They are that we operate under creativity, integrity, generosity, and rest. Do we agree with this? Yes, we've already agreed. It makes it so much easier to just bring everybody back. You don't have to constantly be reinventing the wheel. Now, each one of those pillars, like you said, is a day to day, constant, ever changing type of thing, but the base of it is going to remain something that you can go back to each time
Yeah.
with your team.
Yeah. And just to add to that too, I know for some people, if you haven't gotten to the point of defining your absolute values, it can be a difficult process to launch into. And you think, how do I even get started? So we've written a bunch of blog posts and articles on that. We've got specifics on how to do this. We've even got one for the current environment, how to do it remotely, different sessions that you can have, questions that you can ask. So those are all on the site. We actually created a page that's called Helping. So wearepf.com/helping, and it's all there. So if you want a little guidance on how to just practically do that, just do the best that you can with it, then it's all there.
Thank you so much for that resource. We'll make sure that we have a link to that in the show notes as well. Thank you so much. Karen, for being a guest again here. I appreciate you so much for coming on and sharing your 4 pillars. They've been very interesting, and I think it's a really great thing for an employer to have in place just to help themselves and their team. So don't forget to check the website, The Happy Healthy Workplace, for show notes and links to get in touch with Karen, as well as that resource that she just shared. And we love, love, love feedback here. So if you would like to give me some feedback about how you like the show, maybe guests that you'd like to have on or hear from, and also any specific topics that we haven't yet covered, please email me at Kimberly at thehappyhealthyworkplace.com. I'd love to hear your feedback. That is the close of the Happy Healthy Workplace podcast. Have a happy, healthy day. That's a wrap for today. The Happy Healthy Workplace podcast is now complete. Be sure to subscribe and join us weekly for secrets, solutions, or strategies that help you create a profitable business where people really want to work. This is Kimberly Ficklin, wishing you a happy, healthy day.